They were never labeled as killers, because no one died at any point. But it was much worse than that. I grew up in an area where the properties were so large and the families were so wealthy that they built mansions and walls, sealing themselves away in their own private paradises. We didn't interact with our neighbors, except on some very strange occasions, every so often. I was homeschooled until I was 7 years old. I'll tell you how this story began when I was 4. I thought staying isolated on our family property was what all small children did. Whenever one of my parents had to leave, I begged them to take me with them. They always shook their heads and explained that only adults left the houses, and only during situations that were absolutely, extremely urgent. On top of that, I didn't want toys or games, or anything that other children seemed to enjoy. Instead, what my parents described as wild imagination took over. I began forming bonds with the furniture in our home. I spent my days talking to them. At first, my parents seemed to encourage it, more and more, until the number of pieces of furniture in the house increased drastically. My father always thought of himself as competent when it came to maintenance. He would explain, again and again, how much he loved building things, how he'd made certain parts by hand. So by the time 3 years had passed, I had built deep emotional connections with the furniture in our house. Arnold was the armchair in the living room. It looked like it moved up and down whenever I leaned back in it to read my books. Sophia was my bed. It rocked just slightly, back and forth, and lulled me until I fell completely asleep. There was also Teodoro. It was a small chair, smaller than the rest. He was especially attentive to me. He always listened, even when I had a lot to tell. But above all, I loved Gladys. Gladys was the biggest and softest sofa in the house. Everything about it felt comfortable, warm, and alive, always there for me. It's strange how quickly things can change. It was a Monday, my 7th birthday, and my parents were in the basement, building a new piece of furniture as a gift. A woman had gone missing while driving through the city. Even though our house was fully fenced and secure, she somehow managed to get inside. She knocked on our door, and I startled, because I'd never heard anyone come near the house before. When I opened it, she looked in and her expression twisted into terror. I remember her grabbing me, lifting me into her arms, and running. She carried me away from there. Tomorrow I turn 27, and I've been wondering whether it's right to just sit there while my parents get executed. Every headline, every news broadcast, every single one, has turned them into monsters worse than Dr. Joseph Hader, claiming they reconfigured 167 people by my 7th birthday. They were never called killers. No one was ever dead. But 167 people were dismembered and put back together to build 71 pieces of furniture. In total, 664 human members were reassembled into shapes that no mind could possibly imagine. To this day, people think I'm Buddhist, because in my apartment there's no furniture and no decoration of any kind. My parents were surgeons, and I used to talk to the furniture in our house.